Have you ever heard of a principle or a theory or something called post-mortem redistribution?
Yes.
Can you give a brief explanation of what that is?
So post-mortem redistribution, so after someone dies, the pH of your blood starts to change and the permeability of the tissues isn't maintained the same. So it means if there was like drugs stored in like major organs like your heart or your lungs, they might start to seep out of those organs and go into the neighboring blood. And so this means like they're being redistributed. So maybe there was a concentration of drugs in your heart, and now after death, due to the changes the body might be undergoing, they might go into the blood and increase the concentration. So the blood might not be, and the concentration that's there might not be an exact representation of the concentration at the time right before death, right? So it might have increased due to the tissues releasing some of their drug stores into that blood sample.
When you obtain the blood, when the person, the OME or whomever is obtaining the blood, does it, after death, does it matter where they obtain it from with regards to this redistribution?
Post-mortem redistribution should occur less if you take from a peripheral blood source like the femoral vein, because those veins aren't as close to the major organs, versus if you take blood from a central source like a cardiac, that is closer to your heart and all of the other organs. So it's more likely to have post-mortem redistribution in a central blood source compared to a peripheral, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen in a peripheral blood source.
Does the literature say, identify what is a lethal dose of fentanyl?
So studies are published that provide concentrations of drugs found where it's been determined that fentanyl contributed to the death. So there are studies that give these concentration ranges, yes.
And does it vary from person to person?
Yes, so based on an individual's history of use with the drug, they might have a tolerance to it, which means that you might need a higher concentration to obtain the same desired effect. And it also means that you might need a higher concentration from someone, a chronic user, compared to a naive user for that drug to cause their death. So it can vary what is a lethal concentration for individual to individual.
For a person who has never taken fentanyl before, what is the literature say is a lethal dose?
So just in general, the lowest reported concentrations of fentanyl are 3 nanograms per milliliter, where it's been contributed to their death.
Okay, so in this case we had 15.
Correct.
Which is 5 times that.
Correct.
Okay, now even assuming this redistribution, post-mortem redistribution, is that significantly still above this 3 nanograms per milliliter?
Yes, 15 is greater than 3.
Thank you. I am just a lawyer, so pardon my math. Okay, at a later time, were you asked to examine other of the samples that you were sent by the Utah medical examiner?
Yes, in October of 2022, the client requested that we perform an alcohol and drug screen on the gastric fluid.
And did you do that?
Yes.
Did, following that screen, did you get positive results for which you subsequently performed confirmatory tests?
Yes.
Okay, can you tell us about those?
Yes, so ethanol was detected at 279 milligrams per deciliter. Quetiapine was detected at 16,000 nanograms per milliliter. Fentanyl was detected at 20,000 nanograms per milliliter. Norfentanyl was detected at 52 nanograms per milliliter, and acetylfentanyl was detected at 29 nanograms per milliliter.
We haven't heard about acetylfentanyl. What is that?
Acetylfentanyl is a fentanyl analog, so it's similar in structure, but it's an illicit drug. So there's no prescription pharmaceutical drug where it's going to be prescribed. It's solely illicit, and it's often seen in illicitly manufactured fentanyl as a co-product.
So for purposes of an analyst or a criminal investigator, that would be a marker that this came from a source, this fentanyl came from a source that was illicit.
You could provide that interpretation, yes.
Okay.
I mean, they could have just had acetylfentanyl and maybe a fentanyl prescription, but often when you see acetylfentanyl, it's an indication that the fentanyl was illicit.
Okay. This 279 milligrams per deciliter of ethanol, I want to go into that. First of all, how much alcohol is that in layman's terms, like in order of, say, shots of liquor or 12-ounce beers or whatever?
So this will be kind of a multi-step answer. So the 279 milligrams per deciliter is a concentration. And so your question was asking just about milligrams. So like if you have a beer or a shot of alcohol, that's just in terms of milligrams of ethanol. So to figure that out, you would have to take the 279 times the total volume of gastric fluid that's available.
Were you made aware of the total volume?
Yes, I was.
From whom?
Dr. Ulmer.
Okay. And did she give you a figure?
700 milliliters.
Okay. And so from that you were able to make a calculation?
Yeah, so you would multiply the 279 times the 700 milliliters and doing the conversions for deciliters to milliliters, but you end up with around 1,900 milligrams of ethanol versus a standard drink of ethanol is 14,000 milligrams. So it's well below the amount that you would find just in one standard drink of ethanol.
Is there another possible source for this alcohol than alcoholic beverage?
Yes, so it's known that if you have a source of glucose and bacteria, that ethanol can be formed post-mortem. So the bacteria convert glucose, because it's carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just like ethanol. It can convert glucose into ethanol. And so obviously, like in gastric contents, you might have a source of glucose if there's food there, and then your stomach naturally has bacteria. So this postmortem formation can occur either in the body prior to sample collection, but it could also happen in the collection container because often they don't have a preservative that would inhibit the bacteria from doing this process of postmortem formation of ethanol.
Is there any way you can chemically identify whether it's this postmortem decomposition or vodka?
Not in the testing that we performed.
Okay. Can you tell us, based on your knowledge of the volume in the gastric fluid, anything about this quetiapine, how much of a pill, if you will, would be there, or a dosage?
Right. So again, you would take the concentration, the 16,000 nanograms per milliliter, multiply it times the total 700 milliliters, and you get a very large number. But drugs are given typically in milligram doses, and there's 1 million nanograms in 1 milligram, right? So after you do that math, it ends up being 11 milligrams of quetiapine. I just want to state, like, the assumption is that 700 milliliters of gastric was homogeneous, so that the concentration was consistent throughout the entire volume, and that the sample that was sent to us represents that 700 milliliters as a whole. Like, that assumption has to be made for the calculations that I'm providing.
And so is it that 16,000 come to equal a standard dosage, prescription dosage?
I would say it's less than a standard dosage. I mean, it depends on a person's prescription, but typically like 75, 100, 250 milligrams of quetiapine might be prescribed versus our calculation was 11 milligrams.